for dialing in, giving up your evenings to listen to me. I hope it's interesting. I'm not sure if it will. First of all, I'll start telling you a little bit more about myself. So I'm one of 9 children. So I have 6 sisters, 3 brothers, and 7 of my siblings have diabetes. So that in itself, it just shows the prevalence of this condition, particularly in the Asian community. And it's probably where my interest lies. So I'm one of the last few standing in the family who doesn't have diabetes. And a lot of that is to do with I can't control the genes my parents gave me. I can't control my BAME background, but I can control what I eat. I can control how much I move, etc. And I'm confident that if I did sadly develop diabetes, that I would be able to live with diabetes rather than have the diabetes rule me. What I'm going to talk to you about today, however, is the role of pharmacists in helping patients, or the clinical role of pharmacists in supporting patients to self-care. The average patient will see a healthcare professional for, if they're lucky, about 2 hours a year, maybe 3 or 4. They live with themselves the rest of that time. So the person who can make the most difference to their diabetes is actually the patient themselves. But we talk about caring for yourself, but we don't like the thought of people caring by themselves. Community pharmacists are highly accessible, so we are there to support you around how you take your medicines, around the side effects you may experience, around making sure what to do if you are feeling unwell, for example. So the first question I wanted to sort of pose to you guys is, if you went to your typical pharmacy, you'd be given many of these medicines. And the first question would be, what do these medicines do for me? How do they work? And the reason you need to understand how they work is because then it gives you an idea of what they're doing to your body, but also why it's important to take them regularly. And a pharmacist, we train for 5 years, which is the same amount of time as a doctor trains at university. But the only difference is we train in the use of medicines and how medicines work on the body. So we are not there to diagnose people with this is wrong with you, that is wrong with you, but we are there to help you, particularly around your medicines. It's an astonishing fact that actually only the NHS budget, 10% of the budget is spent on diabetes, and of that, I think it's 10 billion. 1 billion is spent on medicines or treatment. The other 9 billion is spent on complications. So what we are trying to do with the medicines is we are trying to get your sugar under control, your blood pressure under control, your cholesterol under control. And it's not just the medicines on their own, it's your lifestyle as well. However, if you take your medicines properly, you get those things under control. And what sometimes happens is all we do is we chase numbers, as in, I need to get my cholesterol below this, I need to get my blood glucose below this. But for us as pharmacists, it's not just about the numbers. It's about making sure that we get you to that level, because the evidence shows that by getting your diabetes under better control means that you are less likely to, in the longer term, have complications. Those include things like an amputation. It includes things like losing your eyesight, etc., etc. So we as pharmacists are trained, but quite often patients don't realize that we are trained to actually support you in how you take your medicines. And if you have any questions, it's a straightforward conversation. There are also services in community pharmacy through the NHS contract. There are services. So if you're newly prescribed a medicine for diabetes, for example, you are entitled as a patient to receive 3 consultations from your community pharmacist. That's not in a special community pharmacist in Belgrave or a special one in Oadby or a special one in London. Every single community pharmacy can do this service for you. So all you have to do is say, can you register me for the new medicine service? And that will mean that when you first get your medicine, the pharmacist will talk to you about your medicine, so what time of day to take it, how to take it, what the side effects might be. And then a week later, a follow-up consultation or a telephone call to say, Mrs. Patel, Mr. Smith, Mr. Jones, how are you getting on with your medicines? Have you had any problems? Have you missed any doses? Have you got any more questions? And then another conversation about 30 days later, just to make sure. The evidence from this service shows that the adherence, which means people taking their medicine, increases by 50%. Currently, patients with long-term conditions, more than half of patients with a long-term condition don't take their medicine as prescribed. When it comes to diabetes, that's 2/3. When I read this, I thought to myself, this has to be wrong. So 2/3 of people don't take their medicine as they're supposed to. That is crazy. And when I looked more into this, we looked at what causes this and why this is happening. There are two types of issues. One is that people think, I don't want to take my medicine. And that is because they don't fully understand the benefits of the medicine, or they have side effects which they just feel they can't tolerate and therefore don't want to take the medicine. There are other people who don't take the medicine on the basis that they may forget, or their dosage regime is so complicated. So if I had to take that many different tablets a day, I'd start to be thinking about which ones I could cut out, which ones I don't need to take, and I'd want to know what they all do for me. So the pharmacist is really well placed. If you showed a pharmacist 6 different medicines, they would be able to tell you whether you can take them together. They would be able to tell you what side effects you may have with them, how to prevent those side effects. Pharmacists now also work very, very closely with doctors and therefore can say to a doctor, look, this patient really isn't getting on with this medicine. How about you adjust it to this medicine instead? Because the evidence shows that this medicine actually will cause fewer side effects. Metformin is a great example. So standard release metformin is an excellent medicine, and it's the first choice medicine for diabetes. But some people will get diarrhea, they'll get stomachache, they'll get all sorts of side effects with it, and therefore stop taking it. And it may be a whole year before their review comes up and their sugar's gone up quite significantly, and then the doctor will realize. Whereas speaking to your pharmacist, we could have a conversation with your doctor and say, this patient really isn't getting on with this medicine. How about you change it to the modified release preparation, which gives fewer side effects? Or shall we adjust the dose slightly to see if that helps? Because even though we're not going to get the really good control, it's better than getting no control whatsoever. And that's the sort of job pharmacists do. We also have a huge role in patient safety, whereby there are some medicines when you're feeling unwell. So for example, if you've got sickness, diarrhea, or if you've got the flu or something, you may become dehydrated. And if you do, there are a lot of medicines that for diabetes and blood pressure and other conditions that can cause more harm than good. So speaking to your pharmacist will help you to actually take your medicine safely, particularly if you're feeling unwell. So there has been some excellent guidance around COVID, which was written by pharmacists about how to adjust your medicines if you developed COVID, heaven forbid. So that's just some of the things that pharmacists can do. And now you also see pharmacists working inside general practice. So these pharmacists will review all the patients with certain long-term conditions and make sure that they don't fall through the net, to make sure that they're taking the right types of medicine, they're taking the correct dose for their age or for other parameters. So things like if you've had a blood test and your kidney function's changed, then we sometimes have to adjust your medicines. And that's the role of the pharmacist. So it's not that we're treading on doctors' toes, because doctors are very good at what they do, but this is a role for pharmacists to support doctors. And people think, well, I don't see that in my community pharmacy. The role of community pharmacists has changed significantly. I've been doing this for 25 plus years, as Keith said, and I remember my job was sticking labels on boxes. I don't do that anymore. My staff do that. I've got dispensers and checking technicians. My job is to give flu vaccinations. Hopefully in a couple of months' time, we'll be giving COVID vaccinations. My job is to look at the discharge summaries when a patient leaves hospital to make sure the medicines that are being prescribed in community are the correct ones. My job is to talk to patients about how they should take the medicines and support patients to make sure that they are confident in managing their conditions. We currently have a really good pilot around pharmacists managing patients with blood pressure. And this is in the West Midlands with my other hat on. And I can imagine quite soon, we did some work with Keith a while back around pharmacists screening for diabetes, but in the future, helping patients manage their diabetes, because we are so accessible and there is such a huge role around what we can do to support our patients, to complement what the doctors do, not to compete with them. I'll pause there.